Everyone, I'm Jenna, and I help active adults find natural solutions to chronic pain so that they can get back to doing what they love and what they are passionate about. And I am thrilled to have you here today for an exciting discussion on how to restore your gut health. We've got a special guest today who I think you're going to love, especially if you're curious about something as simple as adding more fermented foods into your diet and how it can have such a profound impact on your health. So I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest today. Austin is joining us, and he is the founder of the Fermenters Club and the author of the newly published book, Fearless Fermenting. Austin is really an expert in fermentation, and he teaches workshops on how to make a variety of delicious fermented foods, such as sauerkraut, sourdough bread, kimchi, and kombucha, and many, many more things. So we're really lucky to have him here today to share his knowledge on how fermentation can be easy and a fun way to support your gut health. And just a quick story about how I met Austin. I met him at a local gathering here in San Diego. We got to talking about sourdough bread. I think I maybe had tried some of the bread that he had brought to the potluck we were at, and it was delicious. And at the time, I was doing 100% gluten-free. I had been gluten-free for 7 years, but I was curious about trying to incorporate a little bit of sourdough bread. And so he taught me how to do that, and lo and behold, I could eat sourdough bread with no symptoms. So this was really exciting to me and a big game changer. And so it's because of him that I was able to incorporate eating bread into my diet again after 7 years of going gluten-free. And I also started making kombucha, which is delicious and a wonderful beverage that I enjoy every week. So I'm really excited to have him here today. But first of all, you may be wondering, what does all of this have to do with chronic pain? Well, poor gut health can lead to inflammation, and inflammation is one of the major contributors to chronic pain. So that's why today we'll be diving into how incorporating fermented foods can really help you to improve your gut health. And to highlight this, I would like to reference a study on fermented foods and their effectiveness against inflammatory disease. I will link this study in the chat if you're interested in checking it out, but it was published in January 2023, so just last year, in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. If you want to check it out, the full title is Are Fermented Foods Effective Against Inflammatory Diseases? And this study really focused on the effectiveness of various fermented foods and drinks used for centuries against inflammation, arthritis, and oxidative stress. The anti-inflammatory properties of fermented foods are largely due to their ability to modulate our gut microbiome and the prebiotic effects of things like polyphenols. And Austin's going to get more into this. I know that's a lot of big words, but basically these are the good bacteria that develops during fermentation. For example, fermented vegetables like kimchi and sauerkraut have shown potential in treating or preventing various inflammatory diseases, according to this research study. And another study I just quickly want to mention is one that was conducted in Norway that looked at 34 patients with IBS. And this was really important to me because I have a family member right now that's struggling with that. And it revealed that after 6 weeks of supplementing their diet with sauerkraut, that these participants experienced significant changes in their gut microbiota and noticed that they had an alleviation in their symptoms. Doesn't exactly mention what that is, but their symptoms were alleviated. And this study highlights how even fermented vegetables like sauerkraut can trigger an anti-inflammatory response, which is important when we consider how inflammation drives pain in the body. So with that, let's dive into this topic. Austin, we're so excited to have you here today. And just to start, if you can give us a kind of intro to how you got into fermented foods and what it's all about. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, well, thanks first off, Jenna, for having me on the podcast. I'm always excited to evangelize fermented foods to the world, especially this community that you've cultivated here. So my journey is I've always sort of been involved with food, never as a professional chef or a restaurateur, but like just cooking. And so probably in my early 30s, I got curious about, what's real, what do these buzzwords mean, like organic and seasonal and this and that. And, just sort of sent me on a path towards being curious about that. And along the way, I kind of settled on a diet that you would kind of characterize as a kind of a traditional diet. If you've ever heard of the Weston A. Price Foundation, they've sort of encapsulated the similar principles that I kind of had come to the conclusion of. And then I joined this wonderful group of people. And anyway, one of the pillars of traditional diets is eating fermented foods as part of your diet. So so that really just got me more curious. And then I made my first batch of sauerkraut. I guess it was almost 15 years ago now. And I had grown up in somewhat of a suburban environment where fast foods and microwavable things, and grew up with that. Had to outgrow that on my own, but never really experienced raw the good stuff, like the straight up sauerkraut. Most of us, if we were exposed to sauerkraut as a kid, was sort of the canned version that's totally lifeless and flaccid, and you just put up with it when you eat a sausage or something like that. But the stuff that I made after watching a TV show called Good Eats, if anybody's a fan of Alton Brown, he had an episode about cabbage. He showed how simple it was to make sauerkraut. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna give it a try. Made it. It was wonderful. It was salty. It was sour. And although subtle, I did feel like I started to feel a little bit better because I wasn't really incorporating that much probiotic foods in my diet at that point. So one thing led to another. I was like, wow, I felt like I had discovered, it's like Columbus discovering America. It's like it'd been there all along, but it was news to him. So same way with me. I started reaching out to my friends who were into food, and we sort of started what is now known as Fermenters Club, which is the business. It was just sort of like a gathering of people who are curious about this stuff. And so that's sort of like the background, my backstory of how I got into fermentation. And that was in 2011. And then I started experimenting with new recipes, documenting my work on my blog, which is not my website. And then eventually it led to starting to teach, because I felt like this was lacking at least in our community here in Southern California. But then I later learned it's true all over the world. So I've been able to teach workshops here in California, but also all over the United States and even into Mexico. And the idea is just, teach people how to do this stuff. It's straightforward. It's not rocket science, as they say. And it's important. So that's been my mission. And the next level of getting to that is, to come out with the book, because I'd love to teach people in person. That was one of the other things that's a very sensory experience, to be able to teach somebody, feed them, give them a little bit of the samples of what we're going to make. Then we all make stuff together. They take it home, it ferments, sort of shows them, demystifies it for them. So that's kind of the format. But like I said, I can't be there all over the world at once. So that's why one of the reasons why I decided to write a book about it. So but that was way overboard as far as an intro, but
no, that was a great intro. I just wanted to take a moment to welcome the folks that are jumping on and say hi to Mark, Ronnie, and Gio. Gio said that they have a fermenters club in Scottsdale, actually, so that's interesting. But craft beer making is the focus.
Yeah,
so we're not talking about beer today, but
right, when you see another club, it's usually brewing, like brewing beer and wine and that sort of thing. And I strictly focus on foods, or I should say, tonic foods like including beverages like kombucha, but for the most part, just the probiotic versions of those. But yes, of course, many things are fermentable, including beer and wine.
Awesome. Okay, well, can you tell us a little bit more about the gut microbiome? I know I kind of mentioned it when I was referring to that study about inflammation. Can you just talk about that and its impact on our overall health?
Yeah, sure. In fact, I got a few slides prepared if you want me to just kind of go through that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Here we go. So back to the beginning here. So I kind of like, this is the introduction that I give when people come and attend the class. So I figured it was appropriate here, just because we don't know how well versed folks are with fermented foods. So we'll start from the beginning. So I like to kind of give a definition of food fermentation, because as you just pointed out, your member here who's fermentation applies to making alcoholic beverages. If you're a gardener, it applies to, how we make compost, to turn matter, organic matter into compost. But as it relates to food, I like to say it's a tried and true technique of transforming and or preserving food by encouraging the growth of some kind of microbe. Now, depends on what we're fermenting, whether it's, dairy or legumes or vegetables, different players, so to speak, different microbes are involved. But point is, overall, we're encouraging a set of what we would call good microbes. And what they're doing during the process of fermentation and transforming the food is keeping out the ones that we don't want to the party. The more I study gardening and permaculture and sort of like the true regenerative nature of nature, I discover that good and bad are sort of labels that we put on things. In this case, things we would call something bad that's out of context, right? We don't really want a specific type of mold to persist in our jar of sauerkraut, for example. But on its own, out of nature, it's breaking down mulch, it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's not bad there. So anyway, so I could go down lots of rabbit holes. I know we're limited time, but I always tell my audiences, please stop me if I'm going down rabbit. But I just wanted to show you why I put good and bad in quotation marks. All right. So that's what fermentation is as it relates to food. Here's a list of some of the fermented foods in the world. There are hundreds of them. On the left, we have what are called wild ferments. Oh, did I drop? I did sort of a little.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay.
I wasn't recording, so now I am.
Okay. All right. So wild ferments are like sauerkraut, pickles, kimchi. These are ones where we don't have to add any specific set of microbes. The microbes hitch a ride on the food that we're starting to ferment. So in the case of pickles, we've got cucumbers. There's a bloom of microbes already on that vegetable. And all we're doing is we're creating an environment that allows those microbes to thrive. So that's a wild ferment. Cultured ferments, on the other hand, require a specific starter concentrated set of microbes that we know reliably do whatever we want to do. So for example, to convert milk into yogurt, you do need a little bit of yogurt from a previously made batch. And that's chock full of those, both bacteria and yeast. You put them in the milk, then they turn it into yogurt. So certain foods, just to give you an understanding of different types of ferments, classes of ferments, if you will. So, and this is not an exhaustive list at all, but some that you might have heard. Now, what we'll do is kind of we'll teach you how fermentation works, and we'll zoom from our human microbiome down to the gut and tie it all together. So that's my strategy here. So how fermentation works, again, a predominant set of microbes, either that we've added or that's just there. We give them food in the food source, so vegetables or sugar for making kombucha, or the lactose if we're giving them, fermenting milk. And they're just going about their lives, they're living their lives. They feed on the food source, but during that process, they're creating a lot of byproducts, which happen to be nutrients to us. So their byproducts are things like organic acids, amino acids, vitamins, short chain fatty acids, and themselves. They are living when we consume these foods that have been fermented. So And that's kind of the overall approach for what we're doing when we're fermenting food. And it's important to note that, especially with things like vegetables, salt is actually an important ingredient because it actually regulates which microbes can tolerate the environment that we've set up, right? So we're adding it for flavor, but also to help preserve. And the preservation mechanism, if you will, is a certain amount of salt in a brine or in a liquid keeps out the bad guys, keeps out the pathogens. So that's why we use salt for many types of fermentation, not exhaustively, of course, but just something to keep in mind. Let's see. And so here's what it does. So as fermentation proceeds from the base food that we're fermenting, a lot of times nutrients are unlocked. This is especially true in the case of something like sourdough bread. There's inherent nutrients and minerals in the seed, which we grind to make flour, which if we don't soak, sprout, or ferment those seeds, those nutrients remain locked up. So fermentation, by making like old style sourdough bread, helps unfurl some of those chemical bonds, if you will, and allows us to enjoy the minerals that are there inherent in the seeds, the wheat. It also, fermentation creates organic acids, as I mentioned a moment ago, which has an effect of lowering the pH, which is a way to keep food safe, which is another way of saying keeping the bad pathogens, pathogenic microbes out of the party. So also these microbes are creating new vitamins and antioxidants. And lastly, like I said, they contain what are called, what we probably have all heard of at this point, probiotics, which is simply a microbe that confers some type of health benefit onto the host when the host eats it. Do you want me to pause for a moment, Jenna, and just see if there's any questions? If there's any questions, just interrupt me at any time. I invite people.
Yeah, we could, there was a question here on this note. Somebody asked, are certain microbes super good for health generation?
Yes. So I should have put up my standard disclaimer. I'm not a doctor and I'm not Playboy on TV. So I just mean, like, I'm not that well versed in terms of, like, does this specific microbe do this specific thing? And not only am I not well versed, that the state of the art is not, and the science is not there yet. And that is actually the future of it. So scientists are getting better and better at understanding these interactions. But and I think at some point in the future, we'll be able to literally prescribe a specific microbe that we know, okay, that microbe, when it's present in our gut, does this, alleviates this symptom or whatnot. We're not quite there yet. So what we do know is we're sort of borrowing from eons of millennia of traditions, right? Where we know that drinking a little bit of kefir, if you're on the steppes of Mongolia, for example, or in Eastern Europe, you take some fermented sauerkraut. You've cultivated a whole environment, a biome of different microbes, some of which do good for us. So again, I'm being general on purpose because that is where we are as far as like what the scientific understanding of it is. Now, again, there are a few where we can identify the causality, the cause and effect, but it's still kind of a big, I want to call it a crime scene, but there's a lot going on in any specific interaction in one human's gut. There's billions and in fact trillions of microbes hanging out doing their thing. So it's a little bit hard to kind of get through the details of it, but that's where we're headed in terms of the future of using and understanding the microbiome and then being able to prescribe specific microbes. But as far as I know, we're not there yet. Did I artfully dodge the question, or did I take the question?
I think that was good. And, I know most people are aware that probiotics are good for us, but not exactly sure why that is. So you're kind of answering those questions. But do you know, it seems as if we eat fermented foods and get our probiotics from a food source, it'll be easier for our body to like absorb or uptake those probiotics. Is that correct? Versus taking like a supplement or a pill?
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to get to that in the next slide. So I will definitely answer those questions in the next slide here.
Okay, wonderful.
All right. So This is a great artist's depiction of the body microbial. It's just, if you could zoom in, you could see lots of different colors and lots of different shapes of microbes that live in and on our bodies. So it turns out we, human beings have about maybe 50 trillion cells that we would call ours, that have our DNA signature. Well, we have another 1.5 times that number of microbes. So that's a staggering number, 150 trillion. It's hard to think of even what that means. But we have that number of cells that live in and on our bodies. So we are actually outnumbered by our microbes. The good news is that most of them are symbiotic, and they help us, we help them. So, and among that environment, and if you think about it, if you're a microbe, you're, nanometers or micrometers big. A human body is a vast area. So consequently, there are different microbiomes all over our bodies, right? So we've got our skin microbiome, we've got an oral microbiome, we've got our gut microbiome, right? So gut microbiomes gets the spotlight because it's probably the most it's the most studied, and I think it is one. I mean, they're all important, right? Our skin microbiome protects us from elements and gives us nutrients. Our oral microbiome helps us pre-digest food, and they all have their functions. Everything in nature has its function, but the gut microbiome, because it's affects our health in so many ways, is gotten a lot of the spotlight. So just wanted to show you we've got microbiomes all over our body, but if we zoom in now to our gut, it is the sort of largest neighborhood of microbes. So 90% or 95% of that number of 100 and something trillion live in our gastrointestinal tract. And the reason is because it's a vast area. If you're a microbe, if you could magically unfurl an average human's gut, it would be about 400 square feet. So that's pretty big. So it's a lot of real estate. Microbes love it in there. It's warm, it's dark, food goes through there. I mean, it's a good neighborhood if you're a microbe. So consequently, all animal life has evolved with this microbiome in our guts, which provides some pretty key functions. And there are, again, a given human has about 1,000 different species of microbes. Again, if you're eating properly and you've cultivated a good microbiome, most of those are good. There might be a few ones we would consider pathogenic, but if they're kept in check and they're in their own context, they don't cause us trouble. Again, if you haven't noticed, I'm drawing parallels between this microbiome and really any of Earth's biomes, right? Whether I'm talking about the jungle or the savanna, you don't want to have too many gazelles on the savanna, because then they eat all the grass, and then that kills the moles and the voles and the mice, and you don't want to have too many coyotes. And anyway, point being, balance in all things. Nature seeks homeostasis, and that is true within our gut as well.
Yes, and diversity.
And diversity, absolutely. So here's what this ecosystem, regardless of when it's healthy or not, hopefully it's healthy, but what these microbes that live in our gut do is they help us break down certain foods, food molecules that we would otherwise need more energy to assimilate. So they're helping us basically pre-digest our food in a way, and then we can get those molecules more easily. They also, within our gut, produce vitamins, short-chain fatty acids, and other substances that, interestingly, can affect our metabolism. So again, if we've got sort of the wrong crowd in our gut, in other words, maybe certain microbes that create cravings for sugar or processed foods, then that can actually affect our metabolism, how quickly or slowly we digest food. So that actually is again, I'm being very general because the research is just fairly not, I call it shallow for lack of a better scientific term, but there are studies that show that what's in our gut can affect our metabolism, absolutely. Now, what the microbiome also does is it helps us fight pathogenic microbes, which again inevitably come to us from the environment. And they also line all of the tissue of our gastrointestinal tract. So they're providing a physical barrier, but they also interact with the molecules and any other thing that comes through our digestive tract. And now another thing that I think is key, another research point, is that a healthy microbiome does boost our mood. And that's because much of the serotonin, which is one of the two pleasure chemicals that our body produces, is created in our gut. So if we've got a gut that's out of whack, that doesn't have the healthy microbiome that's supporting our body, then our serotonin production can be lower, and we don't feel as good. So there is a direct link between the diversity and the healthiness of our gut microbiome, as well as there's a very strong linkage between our gut and our brain through our the vagus nerve, one of the important nerves that signals. There's a bidirectional signal between our head and our gut.
That's so interesting. Somebody had asked a question. I will, let's see. They had asked, are you familiar with S. boulardii? Someone had said they use that to get rid of candida, break down sugars in some foods.
I have heard of it. Again, I sort of being so general, I again would just say find a food that contains that, because that's one of many players of probably dozens or if not hundreds at this point of microbes that that are beneficial to us when we eat them. So that's just one of them. But I haven't heard of that specific microbe in any context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really interesting. What you had said about the vagus nerve and the connection with the gut and our brain. And this is something I really also I deep dive into this in my program with my clients. So if anyone just wants to learn more about this and also how you can work with resetting the vagus nerve through other modalities such as somatic movement, it's super interesting. And these type of dietary changes, this goes so well along with just a holistic lifestyle in general, where you're doing therapeutic movement and the right exercise and the right mindset. And so this is all, this really links to what I do in my programs with clients. So feel free to reach out to me if you want more support around this. And I also put Austin's website and a link to his Facebook page in there as well. All right.
Oh yeah, good reminders. I mean, gut health is one of, like you said, many ways that we can take care of ourselves. And some of the ones I've been getting into a lot lately are making sure we're drinking clean water, as well as grounding yourself, getting out on the earth and like standing in barefoot in soil and on grass as often as you can, because that I think we're going to discover the new wave of science is electrical. A lot of what we know, anyway, rabbit hole, I know, but the universe is electric, and our connection to the earth is not just a woo thing. There's an actual like voltage reason why we should be standing barefoot on the earth. But anyway, all right. Many ways to stay healthy, though. That's the good news. All right, so should I get back to
keep going.
Almost done with so we're almost about zoomed in. So we've seen what the gut microbiome does for us. Now let's look at what fermented foods, when we eat them, what that does to support our health. So one of the first things it does, especially if you got like a sour smelling food or a kombucha, it makes us salivate. It stimulates our digestion and lets us know, oh, food is coming through. And so that actually starts the whole process, gets our bodies prepared for it. So we'll have an easier digestion. Now, the probiotics themselves, of course, again, if you fermented something properly, and it's very difficult to not ferment something properly, by the way, it's kind of one of the points that I want to make. But that when something is ready to eat, it tastes good, it's got all the organic acids in it, the pH is down to where it needs to be, and it's still full of life. It's still the microbes are still feeding actively, and then when you consume those, these probiotics, these living organisms, they participate in positive interactions with our native gut flora or gut bacteria. And again, I'm being vague because it's very difficult to actually measure in vivo in real time in somebody's gut what's actually going on. But we can infer based on people's mood changes or what comes out at the end. Anyway, point being, there are positive interactions that go on. In some cases, some of those microbes do take up residence within our gut if we're deficient in them, or if our body or the microbiome finds that member of the community useful, then they invite them to join the neighborhood. but that's not true of all the microbes. Some of the microbes that are found, let's say, in a jar of sauerkraut, are not also found in the human gut. So they're passing through. There may be some positive interaction, but they're passing through. So they don't take up residence, so to speak. So it's interesting. It's the best we can say is that positive interactions are happening based on the many species of and strains of bacteria that are found in various fermented foods. Another important point, which you brought up earlier, Jenna, is that in any ecosystem, diversity is what nature seeks. It wants to have lots of members of the community filling in different niches and cooperating with one another. So what has been proven, one of the few things we can say with certainty, is that more different diverse microbes in our gut is always associated with higher health outcomes. So fermented foods are good. The more different variety of fermented foods are also, I would argue, better, right? So if you can maybe if you sourdough bread, well, sourdough bread's kind of a different example, because generally speaking, when you cook a food, like we bake sourdough bread, it does lose its probiotic content. But let's take a better example, like sauerkraut has certain types of microbes that liked to live on the cabbage that we fermented. And that's a little bit different from the kombucha SCOBY, which has yeast-stand bacteria, which like to feed on sugar. So if you're going to consume both of those foods, you're going to get a complementary set of microbes. And that's just giving a long-winded example of how to increase gut microbiome diversity. Now,
That's so
again,
interesting. So Tom, sorry,
really,
can you explain this psychobiotics, what exactly that is, and how that relates to like anxiety? And, you know, I think a lot of people can relate with having anxiety or feeling surges of anger, maybe depression, and especially for our folks here in this group that are maybe struggling with chronic pain or recovering from an injury, I think this could be really helpful for them. And, you know, what I do with my clients, I walk them through just an anti-inflammatory diet. So eating fermented foods is a really great step that you can take right away to incorporate more of that to reduce the inflammation in your body so that you can recover quicker. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's great. I'm glad we're finally, I mean, there's a connection of like one of the points on my slide is what you're talking about. So talk to me more about, like, do you have specific, based on your experience, specific fermented foods that, because again, this was a study I read and I'm like, oh, that's very interesting that it has anti-inflammatory properties, but do you have a little bit more detail about that as far as like specifics, maybe even volume, like how much one would eat, or, you know, just curious to know like some real life examples of helping people reduce inflammation.
Yeah, so one of the things that I suggest is reducing the intake of sugar, of mostly dairy. And when it comes to dairy, we're talking about pasteurized dairy, and we're talking about like dairy that's not raw, so it's lost its, you know, enzymes, it's harder to digest. And then really reducing the intake of other inflammatory foods, which could maybe be gluten for some people, or grains. But this is really interesting because when you ferment something, it changes, you know, your body's ability to digest it. So like I said, I was sensitive to gluten, but eating sourdough bread, and this is common for a lot of people, unless you have celiacs where you can't eat gluten at all. But for some people that are gluten sensitive, they find that when they eat fermented foods, when they eat fermented wheat, that it doesn't cause them symptoms. So that's what I find really interesting.
Yeah, right. Cool. I mean, and you're saying absolutely right. The quality of the food, whether you ferment it or not, makes a lot of difference as far as whether that causes inflammation. Yeah, you mentioned raw dairy is good. I think that what I'm finding is, yes, during sourdough fermentation, a lot of the gluten itself is consumed because it's a food source to the microbes. So that gluten level itself decreases. And typically, not across the board, but usually if somebody is going to the effort of baking their own bread, they're maybe more mindful about what their ingredients they're starting with. And so maybe they're choosing organic flour instead of non-organic flour. And I think the evidence will eventually prove that people who, again, I'm just making a wild call it. Is it okay to mild cursing here? a wild ass claim. That's a better
Yeah.
that gluten intolerance will wind up being a glyphosate intolerance. But okay, that's a rabbit hole I don't need to go down. But because a lot of the wheat crops that's not organic is treated with Roundup or glyphosate in some part of its harvesting. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But yes, reducing inflammation, fermentation microbes help us do that. And then when we eat those fermented foods, they can continue that good process of keeping down inflammation. So, all right. I think I'm behaving myself. Maybe not. Tell me if I'm out of line here. All right, so to get to psychobiotics. All right. So fermented foods are especially important if we have to take something like antibiotics in order to get rid of a specific pathogen. Most of the antibiotics that doctors are still using are indiscriminate. They destroy good and bad bacteria. So it's especially important to help repopulate our gut when we have to take antibiotics to treat something. So again, fermented foods are good all the time, but especially at times when that microbiome is compromised in some way. And then, so psychobiotics is sort of a subset of probiotics, and they are, again, as you were pointing out, specifically noted for helping anxiety, anger, depression, and these sorts of things. There's a great book called The Psychobiotic Revolution that was written maybe 7 years ago. And again, it was a specific subset of microbes that I think they found in kefir, which is like fermented milk from the Caucasus region of sort of like Middle East, Eastern Europe part of the world, where kefir is very prominent, and yogurt and that are very prominent. So that was as what I can remember from reading the book, but it's definitely a cool book to check out to learn more. And that book was written maybe 8 years ago, so who knows how much more research has been done since then. But yeah,
that's super interesting. Some folks in the chat were talking about how kefir, however you pronounce it, really helped them with their gut health. So
awesome.
Wow,
good. I'm glad to hear real world examples are so helpful. Good. Thanks for sharing that. Yep. All right. So any other questions about this slide? So we'll get to the bottom line here, which is, again, a healthy and a diverse gut microbiome is key to ensuring digesting our food well, maybe slip in and keeping down inflammation, and it also affects our mood, right? And fermented foods have lots of nutrients in them. Again, vitamins, short-chain fatty acids, amino acids, the probiotics themselves. And then eating fermented foods regularly can of course help us create long-term positive effects on our gut. And usually I'm doing this slide with it's like, the bullet points come in, and then I can bring in little poop emoji at the end. But I think poop emoji is a perfect spokesman for good gut health, right? Because if he's happy, then that means, everything went through all right.
He's your mascot. Should be all of our mascots.
Right. I do actually, believe it or not, somebody gifted me with a poop emoji hat, and I was wearing it for a while. And then some of my friends were like, you might be sending the wrong signal with that. So you gotta what audience I wear that with. So point taken.
Right.
Any other questions about that? I mean, do you want me to go into, I thought of other, you mentioned prebiotics. So I wanted to come back to that, like what those even are. I mean, just a couple of terms that people have heard. Oh, and also you had asked about how do probiotic pills compare to fermented foods? Or maybe you didn't ask it that way, but that's how I'm going to answer it. But, so prebiotics are specifically mostly fibers. They're like indigestible things that if we ate them, pass right through us, but they seem to certain microbes feed on them. So you'll often see prebiotics delivered in a pill with a probiotic, so that when we sort of ingest it and reconstitute it and rehydrate them, they come back to life, and then they have some food, to eat. But prebiotics can be found naturally in certain foods, like you wouldn't maybe necessarily eat all the time, like unripe bananas, mushrooms, Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes. They contain natural amounts of these specific types of fibers. Now, I'm not too hung up on prebiotics, because I like to say, now what we know about our gut is that, these microbes are lining the entirety of our gastrointestinal tract. So to me, all food, regardless of whether we call it prebiotic, is prebiotic because the microbes are getting first dibs, so to speak. So, so I wouldn't get too hung up on that. If you're eating probiotic foods, especially things like fiber-rich vegetables, then there are those fibers in there too. So, yeah, if you find a pill that's got a prebiotic and a probiotic, that works. What I would just suggest about pills versus food is that the way that probiotic pills are made is they probably have some sort of fermented liquid, then they distill it down, dehydrate them, and then let's say they have 100 million what they call CFUs, colony forming units, in a specific pill. Well, what they do is, based on the research they've done, once they put that into a pill, they reduce the water content. It more or less puts the microbes in, homeostasis, like the Han Solo, like cryogenic. But and then it goes in the pill, and then it goes on the shelf. It goes to the store. You buy it, and then you ingest it. By the time you do that, maybe 10% of those microbes will come back to life. And so that's just how that works. But those 10% will do well in your gut. I mean, these are proven things. But if you're going to make your own sauerkraut in your own house and eat that, you're going to get the additional benefits of even more diversity of microbes. So your average probiotic pill may have 8 to 10 strains of bacteria, which are all, very, known to give us good health benefits. But in a jar of sauerkraut, it might be, a couple dozen, and it might be new ones, and it might be they're constantly evolving, and they've never been put in that stasis and then brought back to life. You're just eating them raw, So I would always advocate, and it's more fun. To me, it's more fun to eat food than to swallow a pill. But
yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know it was 10% of those.
I mean, I think it's something like that. There's a number that they know based on the length of the supply chain, right? It's like it's made in some factory and then goes through all the things. And I'm not trying to disparage that. I think probiotic pills are a great sort of gap. Well, until you learn about fermented foods. But yes, I think they're very helpful. But that's just the reality of how it is. Like when you want to make something that's shelf stable, you sort of have to play the numbers in a way. So, so yeah, that's how they manufacture that. And then, let's say a probiotic pill has something like 10 billion CFUs in it. Again, that they assume will survive. There's probably more, but that's how many will probably revive when you eat them. And then that same amount of CFUs or probiotics is in about a 4-ounce serving of whatever, kombucha or yogurt or sauerkraut. There's about the same concentration of that amount of food in just 4 ounces of food. So basically, if I was going to prescribe something, which I can't because I'm not a doctor, I would just say like a few spoonfuls of fermented foods a few times a day, even once a day. Especially if you're new to it, you want to ease your gut ecosystem into it. But I try to eat a little bit of something fermented before and during each meal, because again, before will help tell the body, oh, it's time to eat. We're going to start our digestion, and that'll help you digest other foods. So
that's a great suggestion.
That's
so on that note, though, if somebody's just starting out and they want to get into this, what would be the easiest way for them to get into fermented foods, and where should they start?
Ooh, great question. So I would say it's a combination of what you can eat or not eat, and also what part of the world you live in, right? Because certain places, like here in Southern California, you can go to the grocery store and there's now a section on, all fermented foods, and there's this different section all about kombucha. So if you can get it at a grocery store, at a natural food store, maybe that's a good start, because a lot of these brands that are doing what we're doing at home are usually started out by an enthusiast, as somebody nutty like myself who quit their lucrative day job to do this. But point being is, the small makers that you might find in your local area that have found their way to maybe your farmer's market or supermarket, they're usually putting a lot of care and attention into it. So if you find something like vegetables that are they need to be in the refrigerated section, because if they're sitting out on the shelf at room temperature, they've been canned or pickled. They're not probiotic. They're not living, right? Because they're not breathing. So just make sure of that. and then just check the label, if it says like living raw or, then that's a good way. And then, so if you're just getting into it, it's a great way without diving in, making stuff yourself, to just figure out what you like, probiotic pickles, or even hot sauces are a lot of times. That I just made a batch of my, I kind of do this once a year. I take a bunch of peppers and I just ferment them. This was actually a 9-month hot sauce, which is a little on the outside, but I just got lazy and forgot about it. But usually it takes about a month or so. You ferment the peppers in a little bit of brine, you blend it up, and then you can just tweak it with a little bit of salt. Anyway, they just put that yesterday.
Delicious. I hope I can get some of that from you.
Yeah, for sure. You can see I've got a couple more bottles back here on this. Yeah, I had a small batch, but so hot sauce can be probiotic, but point being, just go experiment, buy small jars, see what you like to eat, see what your body can tolerate. Again, it's not a dare. We're not trying to overdo it, because by the way, if you do overdo it, I like to say that the results are, they're not going to send you to the hospital, but you might feel like bloaty. If you're, in other words, if you're eating more fermented foods and adding probiotics to your gut at a larger rate than their sort of the ecosystem is used to, it's just going to take a little bit of an adjustment. So again, oftentimes I will overdo it because I made something I love. I eat it, need it, and then again I feel a little bit bloated because there's a lot of probiotics in there. So again, it usually passes fairly quickly, but you can overdo it, because even a good thing, right? Moderation, and even with this kind of stuff. So, but just try out maybe again. Something that fits in your fist. That's a good portion to have maybe in the morning and in the evening.
So folks can they can go to like Whole Foods or whatever health food store is near them and go to the refrigerated section, look for raw on the label of maybe sauerkraut, kimchi, and just get started that way.
Yeah, it's a sort of a low cost way to kind of like figure out what you like and what you don't like, what flavors. And then if you decide, oh yeah, I really like this, and same with so you've got your fermented vegetables like that, you've got your condiments like your hot sauce, you've got dairy beverages, right? So you've got kefir, yogurt. Those are generally, if they say active cultures in them, they've got they've got probiotic content. Kombucha is another thing, which is a fermented tea drink. So really there's a wide variety of different foods and beverages that you can try, all of which contribute to, to that gut health. So try that out. And then if you're like, oh, this is really great, you can in almost every case, I haven't found a case where you just wouldn't want to make it at home. You can make it at home. So it's actually very straightforward to do that. And so that's kind of what I do. I teach, as you introduced, I teach workshops on how to do this. So I'm in Southern California, but I also have content online that if you wanted to do like a pre-recorded course that I pre-recorded to learn about how to make miso or how to make sourdough bread, I've got that at Fermenters Club Academy. There's a lot of free content on my website at fermentersclub.com. All the recipes. I've also got a YouTube channel, so this is sort of a way to find me. But yeah, there is a community as virtual as it is. If you've got questions, you can go to the Facebook or Instagram page and leave a comment or ask a question, and I'll usually get back to you pretty quickly. But yeah, I would say just start with it. Start it.
Just go start. So going back to your book, that's a book of recipes, correct? So
Yeah.
folks can find that on Amazon now?
Yeah, so this is a work I've been working on for about 3 years, and it is just about out. Yes, it will be available on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and also hardcover. So that's kind of what I'm working on the details of right now, is just getting the hardcover printed and sent and shipped over and stuff. So right now, if you pre-order a hardcover copy, then you want to do that from my website. I know, sorry, it's a little ahead of the full launch, but you can go on Amazon probably in the next few days, and you'll see the Kindle and paperback versions. If you want the hardcover version, you can go to my website, which the link is here, fermentersclub.com/fearless, and you'll get the hardcover version at 20% off. So, and it'll ship whenever I get it in, so the next 3 or 4 weeks. So I like this one. I mean, I've kind of been showing both versions to different people and getting their feedback and you know, tweaking it. But for the most part, this is I mean, it's good. It's solid. I think it's somewhere between a cookbook. It is a cookbook. It's also kind of a textbook too, right? So it teaches you kind of what we covered today in a little bit more detail. And then it has about 77 recipes. And lots of other goodies that I put in there based on my experience. So yeah, this is kind of the first official public announcement, I guess, of the book. So thanks for letting me do that, Jenna. But yeah, so go check it out. You can actually go to also fearlessfermenting.com, although I need to update that. But I would say Amazon site and or fermentersclub.com/fearless, and you'll get you can get the pre-order.
Great. And people can also learn about, I know a lot of people are into or interested in sourdough bread these days. So you have workshops where people can learn how to, you know, make their own fermented foods like sourdough bread on your website.
I do, yes. So if we go to Fermenters Club Academy, which is you can get there from the main website, there's a pre-recorded class about making sourdough bread. Sometimes I do virtual workshops. I might be doing those again, maybe in the winter time, just to reach more people. But if you're in the Southern California area, in San Diego specifically, I've got a few actually coming up at the beginning of October. So 2 live classes. So yeah, those are all the ways. And then, but yeah, if you want to just browse, look at the website, the recipes is there as well. Different variations, etc. So yeah, lots of ways to learn.
Wonderful. Well, that is so great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Austin. I really appreciate you being here. And this is such a fascinating topic. I think we all learned so much. And if people are interested in learning more about fermented foods, I will post, I already posted the website in the chat, but I will also post a link to your book and a link to how they can take your online workshops.
Great.
And yeah, so everything that Austin shared about gut health is just one piece of the puzzle when it really comes to managing pain in a holistic way. And so that's why in my program, we dive into topics like this, and I really take you step by step on how to do an inflammatory diet as we explore how to heal from the inside out. So if you're wanting more support with this, feel free to reach out and we can create a plan for you that includes gut health, as well as therapeutic movement, and really design a plan that is specific to your goals and your needs for pain relief. So you can just type in the chat box relief if you want to talk to me more about that. And you will have all those links below to reach out to Austin. And it was just such a pleasure having you, and maybe we can do this sometime again.
That would be lovely. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, great. Well, we will be back next week, and next week we're going to be doing another really exciting live stream. It's actually going to be at 5 p.m. on Monday as opposed to 3 p.m. and it's going to be on trauma and chronic pain. And so I will put the link to that and the flyer and all of that information at the end of the day today. So be on the lookout for that, and we will see you all next time. Take care.